Hey there, it's Hillary, and today I'm doing my October wrap-up. I know if you're looking at my picture, you're like, man, she only read one book this month. I really didn't. I read some ebooks and I listened to some audiobooks, but I actually only have one physical book to show you. So I read 7 books for the month of October, which is not too bad. It's not as good as it could have been, but still very good. I like to read at least 4 books a month, so 7 is good. It's more than what I'd like to read in a month. The first thing that I read, like you saw from my thumbnail, is City of Fallen Angels. It is book number 4 in the Mortal Instruments series, and I have to be honest, it was my least favorite that I had read so far by Cassandra Clare. I like the first 3 Mortal Instruments. I really like the Infernal Devices. I think I like the Infernal Devices more than the first 3 of the Mortal Instruments. I'm not sure. It's hard to say. They're so very different. But this one kind of fell flat for me. I still gave it 4 stars, but if you're comparing it to the first 3 of the Mortal Instruments and the Infernal Devices, I just don't think it was as good. The storyline in this one did not get me like the first 3 in the Mortal Instruments got me. It's just like, it's a totally new series almost. And I know that that's probably why they tell you to break them up with the Infernal Devices. I don't know if it's because that's how she wrote it, but I didn't get into this one as much. I am curious to see how the series continues, and by no means did this book make me not want to read it anymore, because I still thought it was very good, and it still has a lot of Cassandra Clare's iconic writing, but like I said, it's just the story just didn't get me like it had in the previous books. And I do want to see how all the series, or I guess you could say all the series, because it's kind of almost like it's 3 series, but I want to see how they all come together and make like one giant story, one giant world. You're getting a lot of hints in this one as to how they tie together to the Infernal Devices, but I'm really curious to see like when they finally come together. The next thing that I read at the beginning of October was Two Dark Reigns. I did really enjoy this one. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the previous 2. I gave this one 4 stars. I think I gave the previous 2 when I read them 5 stars. I think this one I gave it 4 stars because it seems like it's a bit slower. There was a lot of plotting, a lot of scheming, a lot of planning. There was just a lot going on, a lot of build up to get to like those last few chapters. But then so much happened in those last couple chapters, and it definitely left off on a, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in this next book? I can't believe I have to wait a year, which is how her books tend to end. She's pretty much done that in every single book, and this one was no different when it came to the ending. I really did like this one because you did get a lot of backstory about the Blue Queen, and I know that she has books dedicated just to the Blue Queens, which I might end up having to read. Now that we got so much backstory on them in this one, I might have to read the books so that I get the full story about them. But I have to go back to that ending. There were so many reviews that were like, oh my gosh, this ending is insane, and it really is. Like, those last couple chapters of this book, so much happens. I cannot wait to see what's going to happen in this last book. I don't even think we have a title for the last book yet, but I cannot wait to see what happens. And not only what happens, but how it affects the characters that we still have in this book. I kind of give away a hint that certain people don't make it, but I didn't say who. But if you haven't read this series, I strongly suggest, like, it's an amazing series. The next thing that I read for the month of October, I listened to the audiobook for Children of Blood and Bone. I had been waiting for this for a while. I had it on hold, and the hold on it was like a couple months long. So I waited a while to get this book. There was so much hype around it. People have said it's the best book that they've read this year. It's been talked about all over the place on Jimmy Fallon and so many different places, not just Goodreads, not just booktubers. I mean, it's being talked about everywhere. And I have to be honest, I didn't like it that much. I was not a fan of this book. I only gave it 3 stars. I don't think that I'm going to continue the series because I don't care enough about the characters to want to keep reading it. In my Goodreads review, I said that the book was okay. But I feel like a book that has this much hype around it, that everyone's saying it's a 5-star read, it's the best book that they're reading, it shouldn't just feel okay. It should feel so much more than that. And I wasn't a huge fan of the magic system in this book. I didn't care for all the different deities. I thought it was too confusing to try to figure out and remember which deity went with which magic. I really didn't like the main character. I was not a fan of the hate to love relationship in this book. There was just so much about this book that I could not get behind. And it really made this a struggle to listen to because I wasn't feeling it. And I was really glad that I was listening to it because I think if I was reading it, I would have stopped. Whereas the audiobook, I could keep listening to it while I was doing other things, but I was just so not engaged in this book. And I definitely can say that it would not be like a 5-star read for me. I'm curious what everyone else thought about it, that they thought it was so amazing. And I'm also wondering if it just didn't live up to the hype for me. And I guess it just all comes back to the fact that I just didn't enjoy it. And I'm not going to continue the series. I didn't enjoy it enough, and I didn't care enough about the characters or the plot to care to keep reading it. The next thing that I read was for book club, and it was Tock by Dean Koontz. Our book club picked a scary thriller type book for our book club for the month of October, and I was very disappointed by this book as well. I only gave our book 2 stars. I was not impressed. I felt I had many bad things to say about the book during the book club meeting. I did not think that this book lived up to his standards, where I had read like his books were so amazing and they were so scary, and then this one came out being more of like a comedy. And I know it says that on the cover, but this was definitely cheesy horror film turned into a book. And I just was not a fan. I could not get behind it from the very beginning of the book. I knew from the first couple sentences that I was going to absolutely hate this book, and I did. I honestly probably could have gave it 1 star and felt okay with that. I don't even know if there was anything that I liked about this book. I just disliked it that much. And even one of the girls in our book club who is a fan of Dean Koontz did not like this book at all. She said that this book was nothing like any of his other books, and we did read a little bit of information. I guess his book that he had wrote right before this one freaked him out, so he took like a whole different turn on book, and I wish he would have just taken a year off because this book was horrible. The next thing that I listened to was the audiobook of The Bear and the Nightingale. I knew that this was sort of like a fairy tale retelling going into it, and I was excited to give this one a try. I only gave this one 3 stars though. This was another book that I was not very interested in the story. I find a lot of times that when you do a retelling of a Russian fairy tale, they come out very strange. I felt the same way about Vasa in the Night. It's also a Russian fairy tale retelling, and it also was very strange. So I don't know if it's just something about Russian fairy tales and the way they are when we turn them into an American story, if it's just very strange. I don't know. I think that this book could have been very interesting, but there were just certain parts of it that were just so strange and so weird and so hard to describe. I don't know. I guess if I had to try to take a guess as to like the closest thing to describe it, would be like a Grimm fairy tale. Like, it's a fairy tale, but it has a very dark and twist to it. So, unfortunately, this is another one that I'm not going to be continuing the series on because, again, I'm not interested enough and I'm not devoted enough to the characters to want to know how the story ends. I feel like this book ended very abruptly, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay that it doesn't really leave you on like a huge cliffhanger, so I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to know what happens. I'm okay with the way this one left off and just not continuing the story. The next thing I read, finally, I read something decent. I felt like this whole month was just horrible for book reading for me. I kept reading book after book that was not very good, and when I finally got to my next one, which it was everything that I needed. I felt like I had been in such a slump for the month of October because everything that I was reading was so horrible. It really made it difficult to keep wanting to read things. So I listened to an audiobook of The Bells. I checked it out from the library, and the writing style in this book is absolutely amazing. I gave this book 5 stars. I felt like everything she was describing to me, I could see it, I could smell it, I could taste it. It really made me want to go and eat a whole bunch of sweets because they are constantly describing desserts in this book, and she just did such a great job. The idea for this book is really interesting. It has dystopian vibes to it, which I love because I love dystopian books. I just think that they did such a great job in this book. I was definitely surprised, I was intrigued, I was entertained the entire book. She did such a great job. I have read some reviews for the next book, which comes out in March, and they don't seem like she's done as good of a job on this book as she did the first one, so we'll see. I am going to continue this series. I do want to read the next one and find out what happens. I do think that this book has left us off with one character that we have had little tiny snippets from the entire way through the book, and you finally get information about this character at the very end of the book. I'm curious to see if we get more information about some of the other characters that we don't get very much information from in the next book as well. I do feel like the synopsis for the next book has spoiled something for us. If you have read the first book and you go and look at the synopsis for the second book, it says that she has a new love, and I don't think that that was really put into effect in the first book. So I find it odd that they put it in the synopsis for the second book. I think it's a bit of a spoiler. Maybe that's just me. I didn't see any other comments that they were spoiled by it, so maybe it's just me. I think it was something that was kind of hinted that could happen, but it wasn't stated, whereas in the synopsis it says her new love. And I just think that was a bit too much of a spoiler. Like I said, I've found this book to be really good. I don't really have any complaints about it. There were a couple things that I could see that would bother some people. It definitely has sexual assault in it, so if that's something that you're bothered by, it might be difficult for you to read. It wasn't a bother to me. Not saying that sexual assault is okay, but I wasn't so bothered that I couldn't continue the story. So there are some things like that, but nothing that bothered me to the point where I wasn't all about this book. This book was one of the best ones that I've read in quite a while, although, like you can see, the books that I'd read earlier in the month, I didn't have such good luck with books that I've been reading lately, so it's not really saying that much. The last thing that I read for the month, at the time I'm recording this, I'm not finished with it yet, but there are a couple days left in the month, so I know that I will get this book done, and that is Armada by Ernest Cline. I am quite excited. I have found that I really enjoy Ernest Cline as an author. I think it's something about his writing style that is just so interesting to me. I love that he makes his books, at least the 2 that I've read Ready Player One and Armada. His books are full of 70s and 80s references, which I love. and it's just something about the way he writes that is very interesting. He does have a tendency to put very dry sections into his book. I found that it was the case with Ready Player One. There was like one chunk where it was like definitely very scientific, and there is a section in this book that sort of happens the same way, where he's reading off like a timeline, and it's definitely a very dry section. But it's not very long. It's only like a couple pages worth of information. I do think that this book is not for everyone. This book is a sci-fi based book, but it's definitely more of like video gamer sci-fi based book. And I'm wondering if that tends to be the style that he likes to write, because Ready Player One is very similar, where it's a video game based story, and so is Armada. Armada is also video game based story where these people are playing a video game, but the video game is training them to be in the military without them knowing it. So I think it's a really interesting idea. It's really something that kind of makes you think, like, all of these different video games that we have out there, is that what they're subliminally doing? I don't know. As my husband is a video gamer and I'm a video gamer, so this is definitely a kind of book that interests me. I don't know if it's something that you would be interested in if you're not into video gaming or video games in general. Now, if you are not a video gamer and you liked Ready Player One, is it something that you might be interested in? I'm not sure. Maybe. I feel like this one has a lot more video game story than Ready Player One. As I'm reading it, I'm really enjoying it so far, and it will be done before the end of the month. I can't say what I would rate it because I'm not done, but like I said, I'm really enjoying it so far. Those are the 7 books that I read for the month of October. If you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments what you thought about them. If you liked this video, please feel free to leave me a like, and if you'd like to see more videos by me, please feel free to subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!